Hey, hey,
Hey man,
how are you?
good to see you. Long time no see.
Oh man, it's been a long time. How long has it been? When was it? So the last time I saw you was we were having, I think maybe breakfast or lunch with Yumi and Edge in New York.
Right. Wow. That was some time ago.
I mean, we talked since then a little bit here and there, but it's been a long time.
Too long. So this is a
Yeah,
this is a great reunion.
I love it, man. And you've been busy doing your thing, man.
Yeah,
I love it.
I have.
Well, where are you at right now? Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Boston,
Okay.
and it's it's chilly out here. That getting to be Thanksgiving time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are recording this the day before Thanksgiving. So it's appropriate that we're talking about food, and hopefully people can take the holiday season uh and take some of this knowledge that you've garnered and gathered and put into this incredible book. I started to be able to go through it. Eat and Beat Disease wrote a great title. I know you've always been well, you've got such a great history. Your YouTube talk about angiogenesis, just tens of millions of people saw that, and it's quite you're really the first person, I think, publicly to really kind of break something down that was very unknown to a general population. So why don't you just crack into that? Your pre-book time, your the foundation of the Angiogenesis Foundation, and then really what set the stage, because I know you've always been curious about foods and their unlocking ability for the body. So, yeah, talk to me about that on ramp of the book and your latest passions.
So, for people who don't know me, I'm a medical doctor by training, internal medicine. So that means that I'm trained to take care of young and old, men and women, healthy and sick. And one of the things that I've always really been focused on is trying to keep people who are healthy, so prevent them from getting sick. But for people who did get sick, you can't prevent it from everyone. My goal is always to get them better, to get them well again. So that's a little bit different than I think a lot of the philosophy that people associate with the medical care system, the healthcare system, which is, you don't worry about sickness until you are sick. And once you are sick, you basically the system keeps on throwing javelins to see if you can spear the disease, until you've got nothing left.
Mm.
And my view is rather than this being kind of a linear process where you're well until you're sick and then you keep running after the disease, it's really more of a holistic circular system where, we start at the top of the clock, top of the hour, and we're healthy. Over the course of our lifetimes, we might slip down to 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, but the key is to kind of get past six and get back on your way to health. And so you can kind of get at the top of the hour again. So that's always been my philosophy. I'm also a research scientist. So I'm what they call a vascular biologist. Vascular meaning blood vessels. I study blood vessels, and blood vessels are incredibly important for health as well as disease because our bodies are filled with about 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels. That's an enormous number of blood vessels. In fact, if you were to pull out all the blood vessels in a body and line them up end to end, you'd form a thread that would wrap around the earth twice. So you might imagine correctly that this kind of a huge system, which delivers oxygen, which delivers nutrients to every cell and every organ in our body, has to work perfectly. And in fact, when it works perfectly, it defends our health because it prevents our tissues from dying. You got enough oxygen, you got enough nutrients. It also prevents diseases from forming that can hijack blood vessels as well, including cancer. So as an angiogenesis guy, angiogenesis is just how the body grows blood vessels. I have done research in this area for 3 decades, and I trained with the pioneer of this field, a guy named Judah Folkman. My focus has always been thinking about common denominators of disease and common denominators of health. And because of that, I wound up creating a nonprofit organization called the Angiogenesis Foundation. And we took this like a slightly iconoclastic approach, which is not to look at what makes a disease unique in and of itself, like what makes breast cancer unique, what makes Alzheimer's unique, what makes diabetes unique. There are lots of great, amazing organizations that already do that kind of work. What we wanted to do is to say, what makes all these diseases the same? What are they unified by? And if we could figure out what their common denominators are, maybe we could actually pull the bow back and send a single arrow through the whole kit caboodle. About 70 different diseases. And that's actually what we discovered, is that problems in our health defense system called angiogenesis, our blood vessel system, is the underpinning between cancer, heart disease, blindness, stroke, arthritis, about 70 different conditions. But by that token, if you were to look at the opposite end of the spectrum, turn that sock inside out, and you would find that healthy blood vessels is the key to preventing these diseases as well. So through my organization, which is a nonprofit, a 501c3, supported by donations, we actually have been involved with at the center point of the successful development of 41 FDA-approved treatments for cancer, diabetes, and complications of blindness. So, what I always say to people who ask me, how I got into plant-based foods and nutrition, I always tell people that my street cred, my background is really in drug development. So I'm not about replacing medicines with food and throwing out, all the tools that we've had for 1,000 years. I'm about how do we actually add new tools to the toolbox, which is the food all around us. So with the kind of success we've had in developing new treatments for serious diseases, I realized that maybe there's an opportunity to prevent the disease in the first place. And because we've been involved with inventing many of the systems used to develop drugs, we thought, why don't we actually just throw food into those same test systems to see what they would do? And the eureka moment for me was in a experiment that I did, and I showed in my TED Talk, where we literally looked at cancer drugs, regular pharmaceuticals, and then we threw in a variety of foods from soy, ginger, garlic, tea, berries, and we just essentially blinded ourselves to what the actual identity was and let the science speak for itself. And when we actually got the graph and we saw all the bar charts and we saw all the potencies that are there, the light bulb that went off my head was seeing that in many cases, the food stood side to side, head to head, on par with the drugs. And in some cases, they were better. And so that really lends a new kind of way to look at this emerging field called food as medicine, which is what I'm actually doing now.
Dude, that's that's amazing. And I love that approach in the sense that almost blinding yourself to that and just looking at the raw data without, because and it's also what were the parameters, just out of curiosity, because foods are so pleomorphic in their ability to help and heal, and from blueberries to turning on stem cells to antioxidants to all of those things. What were the through lines? And the through lines obviously were, maybe break down the angiogenesis a little bit then, and what that through line was, because angiogenesis also is, as you very clearly state, it also works to, cancer turns angiogenesis on for its own benefits as well. And so there's that plus and minus. So number one, there's that. And then number two, what were those through lines that you used to determine and to see those plants doing their thing versus the drugs?
Yeah, well, to back up just a little bit, when I started to look at food and health, I came at this, very authentically, because I actually grew up in a very in a household that always had great food, The smells kind of my mom's kitchens were always amazing. And when I travel, and I've done a lot of traveling in my time, I really love to explore the local cuisines and the local produce and what's in the markets and what is regional, what is traditional. And that's always been interesting to me. And I think that food is incredibly intimate, one of the most intimate things in our lives, because it's what we encounter from the time we're born to our very last breath. We're actually having some kind of food. It is a substance we introduce into our body 3 times a day. And our food tells us something about how we grew up. Everyone has that recall of something that they loved when they were growing up that they would eat, or a favorite food that they always order when they see it on the menu, or something they would love to cook for themselves. And our food tells us something about our families, our communities, and our culture. And everybody comes from somewhere, right? So regardless of where your viewers and listeners are coming from, there is something in their background that connects them with food. And food is a common topic. So you and I don't have to know each other, or we do, but we didn't have to. And if we talked about food, it would be something that we would instantly connect on, because it's something that we have this common enthusiasm and language for. Okay. So if you recognize food as something as pleasurable, as something recognizable, then the question is, how do you actually study that? Because if you just look at the marketing that's out there on diet and health, and it's everywhere, whether it's a meal delivery service, whether it's a superfood product, or you go to a Whole Foods, Trader Joe, pick your supermarket of choice, there's always a kind of a superfood section. And it gets confusing, right? Because almost every month or every season, there's another superfood out there. That one time it was the acai berry, and then it was a goji berry, and then it was, ashwagandha. And the reality is that Mother Nature has really given us a treasure house of foods that contain natural chemicals. But there's no single superfood. There's no single food that's going to actually do it all. We like to actually try to reduce it to that way. Like, that's human nature, but in fact, it doesn't work that way. What's happening is that there's no superfood, but there is a super body. Our bodies are actually designed to be extraordinary. And so what I look at for food and health, it's not just about the food, it's how our body responds to what you put inside it. And that leads to this framework that you talked about. So when I look at food as medicine, what am I looking at? It could be, there's so many possibilities of what foods can actually do. So I look at, I have a pretty simple filter. Our health is dependent upon 5 health defense systems in our body. And I read about this in Eat to Beat Disease. Our circulation, angiogenesis. So how does food help grow blood vessels or help prune blood vessels away? Number 2, our stem cells. We are filled with stem cells that regenerate us from the inside out. I mean, we're not starfish or salamanders, so we can't grow a new arm or tail, but we do regenerate our liver, our lung, our hair, our skin. It's remarkable. In fact, we can even regenerate parts of our brain, which is really, really amazing. So what foods actually stimulate our stem cells? And by the way, you mentioned cancer. We're going to talk more about this, I'm sure. Cancer is a sneaky thing, because they once were normal cells, and somehow they mutated and became abnormal cells. Well, the reason cancers stick around even after you have treated them successfully, cancer treatment's been successfully treated, is that they have these little cancer stem cells, baby stem cells that are continuously popping out the next generation of cancers. There are foods that actually kill cancer stem cells, which is amazing. There's no pharmaceutical in the world that can actually do that, but Mother Nature has it laced in her foods. Our microbiome, another defense system. What foods make our gut better? What foods make our gut worse? Our DNA, not just a genetic code, but in fact protects us from the harms of the environment. I always ask people, like, okay, if you still drive a car with gasoline as opposed to electricity, and when you're at the filling station, do you stand upwind or downwind? And most people look at me like, huh? What are you asking me? And what I'm saying is that if you smell the fumes going into your car, you're standing downwind. And those fumes are a petroleum product, the solvent that's going into your lungs because you smell it, and it's mutating your DNA in your lung. So how come you don't develop lung cancer the next day? It's because our DNA is hardwired as a defense system to fix that. If you're in a sunny location like Southern California, and you're, driving on the freeway on a beautiful sunny day with the window down and, or the top down and your window down, or maybe you have your window up and you've got a sun visor that you haven't folded down. That ultraviolet light coming in through your car window, damaging your DNA on your arm, okay, on your face. So how come we don't get skin cancer the next day? Because our DNA fixes itself. Finally, is our immune system. Our immune system is more powerful than we ever thought. And the best, and everybody knows how important the immune system is after the last couple of years, but the best story about power of the immune system is that even if you're in your 80s or 90s, if you have cancer, even if the cancer has spread, our immune system is powerful enough, if given the chance, to go and wipe out all the cancer in your body and restore health. Remember, I told you my goal is to kind of get people back to the top of the hour of their health. And that's now possible because we've got strong immunity. So when I look at the framework, the through lines as you talk about, I ask the question, how does any given food affect our health defenses? What is the evidence for that? And how do we use the tools of measuring these health systems to know if the defense is working or not working? And that's basically how we do it.
Dude, that's an amazing explanation. And so many things are connected to that. Some of the things I was working on a project with Dr. Henry Young, who at Mercer University in the 80s discovered totipotent stem cells. And it comes to find out that the blueberry, when consumed, a cup of blueberries every day for 30 days turned on your totipotent stem cells. And that is basically the genesis of all the mother stem cells, turned on production by 6 times, and just by consuming blueberries. So just along what you said, that's just that one lens that you're looking at. And of course, now we're finding anthocyanins and everything are actually feeding bacteria. They're not just antioxidants, but they're feeding bacteria. So it's so cool that you've come down to which every one of these simple pillars are obviously infinitely complex. But what are some of the measures? So when you're looking at a blueberry, you're looking at green tea, you're looking at ginger, you're looking at, how are you scouring the literature? Are you doing some of those tests? I mean, obviously you can do a lot of the tests yourself. So what are some of the measures you're taking to determine that, hey, these things, this is hitting all 5 of your defense systems? Yeah. How are you finding that out?
Well, so the great thing is that there are well-defined measures for each of these health defenses. So for blood vessels, you can measure your circulation. And there's lots of different ways you can measure your circulation. Some of the simple ways of measuring the health of your blood vessels is done with a simple blood pressure cuff, actually. You do a blood pressure cuff, and then there's a little probe that is an ultrasound, and you just listen for the rebound and how quickly your blood comes back. That's a reflection of your blood vessel health. Sometimes you do a biopsy, sometimes you do a blood test. There's lots of different ways. Sometimes there's imaging. And so there's many ways of evaluating these outputs, the functionality of each health defense. Stem cells are pretty straightforward, which is, generally speaking, whatever the organ that you're trying to heal or make better or preserve its health, you can correlate it by doing a simple blood test. And in a vial blood, same kind of blood that you would actually see in a typical physical exam, you can actually measure the stem cells that are in there. It's not a routine test, but it's a research test, and you can actually count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. And if you're going to do a research, you can actually give somebody pomegranate juice, or you can give somebody blueberries, and then you can actually draw their blood and count their stem cells, and then you can actually start to track what the impact is at the clinical level. Now, of course, you can go into the lab and study that as well. Gut microbiome, the output is poop, frankly. We're able to use a technique called metagenomics to be able to take a smear and you send it into the lab, and it's really difficult. By the way, we've got like 39 trillion bacteria in our body. So that's like a star field. No way you can actually do the genetics of every single thing. So metagenomics sounds exactly like what it's been intended to sound like. The meta analysis tells you generally what the populations are, what the ecosystem, what the neighborhood is actually like. We can measure that. DNA, 10 years ago, it cost $1 million to actually look at your DNA. Now for a couple of hundred, you can actually do a pretty good genetic analysis. For a few thousand, you can actually do the entire human genome and get right down to it. So, less than the cost of a rental car, you can actually, for a week, you can actually get your entire genome analyzed. Partly that's due to the advancement of the technology, partly that's due to the power of computing, because technology has really been given us tools to be able to do everything deeper, harder, and faster. And then immune system, there's a lot of ways of measuring your immune system. I talk to people and say that our immune system is like an army of super soldiers. And if you remember when we were kids, you got a toy bag of green plastic soldiers, right? You open up that bag and you pour them out, and they're all different, but they all look the same. So the immune system is kind of like that. And you got to sort the soldiers to see which one's got kneeling down and it's got the bazooka, which one's carrying the rifle, which one is, like got the grenade in their hand. And you sort those out and you find there's this whole army of super soldiers, and each of the cell types of the immune system is trained with its own weapon to fight invaders from the outside and the inside. Invaders from the outside, bacteria and viruses. Invaders from the inside, cancer. All right. So what you do is you can measure the blood cells. Sometimes these immune cells also produce antibodies. And now everybody knows just from the internet, and with COVID, you can measure antibodies. And you can actually compare that over time. And of course, you can actually just see if people get sick, and you can measure that as well. So there are both really practical, easy to do, relatively easy to do measures for our health defenses, i.e. our health. And then if you want to get down to the details on this at the genomic level, we can go there too.
Wow. Yeah, you've really condensed it in obviously a lifetime and body of work. You've really taken so much of this, food as medicine concept and really actually quantified it and brought it, down to earth into this way that then verifies you're backing up your blueberry recommendation, you're backing up your olive oil recommendation, you're backing up the obviously, and you cite this in the book, in the meditation diet. It's probably a good idea, especially at this point in our lives. The Mediterranean diet, which has been studied quite a bit, and largely a plant-based diet. So let's talk about that a little bit, and what are some of the things that maybe surprised you along the way, and maybe are still surprising you along the way?
Yeah, well, look, I always get asked, hey doc, what are the top 5 foods everyone should eat? Or, what's the one thing that I should actually eat? And I come back at this by saying, you know what, from the research I've done, there's some great news. And the great news is that you can eat a lot of different things. In fact, I write in my book about 200 different foods. And what I think is, because food should be aligned with what you enjoy eating, right? So I'm a little bit different than a lot of doctors who tell you what not to eat. I can tell you what not to eat, but I prefer to tell you what to eat, what you should add to your life rather than elimination. Because, human nature is pretty predictable. Human nature abhors deprivation. So when you tell somebody you can't do it, you want to do it. You're thinking about doing it. And, and the other thing about food and health, so many people are actually discouraged, I think, because they associate healthy eating with deprivation. I can't do what I want. Or they think about it, they anticipate, they're cringing in anticipation of fear, guilt, or shame. You're a bad person for eating this. Well, actually, I don't believe that. I think that if you go back to a lot of the traditional diets and look elementally at the ingredients, plant-based foods, hands down, have shown in every research study to do something good for us and something that we should actually be leaning more into. And it's not eating a wonder food or five foods. Eat as diversely as you possibly can, because our gut, our healthy gut bacteria, loves diversity. You know, and that's really something that we should do. I also think that, there's some basic principles. Eat plant-based foods, so that's fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts and seeds, healthy oils, all good for you. And the other foods that are actually beneficial happen to be seafood, because fish, oily fish, actually eat a lot of plants over the food chain. The omega-3s that we find in salmon, for example, originally came from plankton and algae. And so it all still comes back down to the plant, but seafood can actually be very rich in omega-3s, and that's healthy as well. And then there's some beverages which also come from plants, coffee and tea, and to a different extent, red wine and even beer, not because of the alcohol, but because of the fermentation process. You wind up having all the stuff that makes red wine red, and beer, the stuff that's floating in beer from the hops, actually are also healthy as well. So, so I think that there is a rich choice of healthy ingredients. You just need to know what those are, and just keep your eye, have your radar ready to light up when something healthy, it comes before you or is on the menu.
Right. Well, I love that you say that, and and there is a lot of things. Like, listen, I think what are your thoughts? It's more of a question, because I have my point of view. Like, I like to. I don't consume fish anymore, but I like to go, and actually I have phytoplankton sitting in my fridge right now, and I consume that. And I also raw spirulina, consume that on a daily basis. So I keep going to the source. You know me, I've spent my career going to the source of stuff. So I just keep doing that. What are your thoughts though then on, the bigger picture of the seafood industry, the quality, the contaminants in our societies that certainly from a fatty fish perspective can bioaccumulate heavy metals, pesticides, everything else? What are your, have you tinkered around and seeing any of the contamination issues at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there's a macro picture here about our own individual health, the health of our communities, the health of our species as humans, and of course, how that's tied to the health of the planet. And so when you realize all of those health recipients are interconnected, it's very quick to see that if we actually do something that's not good for our planet, we pay for it on an individual basis as well, because it's going to be found in our food, it's going to be found in the air we breathe, the water we drink, and we can't get away from that. And I think that that's where, for generations, decades, there's been sort of like 50 years ago, nobody even thought about it, or they were not wanting to think about it. Then became awareness. And now we've come to kind of a critical point. I think that we're at critical mass with the health of the planet. And climate change honestly, doesn't matter who caused it or what caused it. The bottom line is that we got to kind of get back to equilibrium. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for balance, just like everything else. And so as it relates to food contaminants, if we don't treat our planet well, the fish are going to get contaminated with heavy metals. I mean, there's already heavy metals in the ocean anyway, but anything that we dump toxic in the water winds up getting into the smaller fish, which are eaten by the bigger fish, which are eaten by the bigger fish. And then you wind up actually having them accumulate in fish that we might eat higher in the food chain. But it's not just seafood. I think that the same degree of alertness and alarm that we need to be having is what we put into our soil. Two really healthy vegetables that I always tell people they should consider eating, especially if they have high blood pressure, right? Which a lot of people do in this country, are beets and spinach. Okay, I love both. And both beets and spinach are great for our blood pressure, because when they grow, they absorb a lot of nitrogen from the soil. That nitrogen builds up in the food, and if you cook them in ways that you really love, or if you juice them, or however you want to actually do it. If you juice them, make sure you use the fiber, keep the fiber in it. When you actually, if you're eating it, you chew it long enough, the beet or the spinach, so don't wolf your food, chew it. Turns out that the healthy gut bacteria on our tongue microbiome, which is amazing, will actually change the nitrogen from the soil in the beet or the spinach into a form that when we swallow it, what gets absorbed into our bloodstream is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a powerful signal for health. And what it does, one of the things it does is it opens up our blood vessels so our blood pressure comes down. A serving of beets that you would have at lunch or dinner will lower your blood pressure by a few points for a whole day, 24 hours. Quite amazing. Every single point that you lower of your systolic blood pressure, which is the top number for your blood pressure, every 1 millimeter of mercury, every 1 point it goes down, lowers your risk of a stroke by 5% over the course of your lifetime. So again, amazing power of food. But let's talk back to the soil. Like I told you, nitrogen's absorbed. Now, what else gets absorbed? Toxins, pesticides, contaminants. And again, this is why we do need to be so mindful of how we grow, harvest, treat our food in terms of like what's not good for our planet, it's not good for our food, what's not good for our food is not good for us as humans. And that's the interconnectivity.
Yeah, I love that. It's so connected. It's funny because right now we're right in the middle of editing a season 2 for our Down to Earth episode, and we did a massive episode, a few episodes on regenerative agriculture. And of course, philosophically, I know that the soil health equal, you can obviously make the uneducated understanding that if you have healthy soil, you have healthy plants. But it's so much deeper than all of that, pun intended, because there's so much diversity. It's like the same diversity you're just describing on the tongue is also the diversity we need to flourish in the soil. And that's through the diversification of other plants, no more monocropping, and a strong microbiome, mycelium, all of that stuff creates this strength of a soil, which then creates the strength of the plant, more bioavailable compounds, and then that creates the strength that is going to be consumed by the person, making the person stronger, and the whole loop continues. So it's funny because over the years, I too celebrate superfoods, but I also now celebrate the super loop of it all, going, how is it grown? Where is it grown? How is it taken care of in its processing of cultivation? How are the people treated? And how is it all extractive, or actually can we make the environment and the people and the soil better as a result of us doing these better practices, and thereby closing that loop to be an extractive process, which has been something that we've done over and over and over again. And it leads us to this kind of critical situation. And I think that I love that you are hitting on these points, because it also is a reductionist attitude, even in myself when I started my career. Let's find the best superfood, let's do all that stuff. But even in our pursuit of health, and even in our pursuit of the best food, we can have this, and even the pursuit of creating the next book can be a reductionist mindset that we need to continue to kind of step back and keep looking at all of these scenarios from a wider lens. And
yeah,
and
well, what's interesting is that biology also plays into this. And for years I was asking myself the question as a scientist, does organic make a difference, right? So there are pundits on one side that say organic is, the most important thing, and then there's others that say organic doesn't matter. And you kind of get ripped, between these two points of view, and don't really know what to think. But now science actually gives us at least partial answer. And I learned this, and it was quite amazing. So it turns out that if you grow organically, well, if you grow conventionally, pesticides are thrown on to prevent bugs from eating away at the plant. If you grow organically, you have to take measures to try to minimize the pests, but the pests are still going to be eaten at the plant. Okay. The plant might not look quite as pretty as the pesticide treated one, but it does get attacked, right? Turns out that plants, when they're nibbled on by bugs, the stems and the leaves, they view that nibbling as a wound. So they have a wound healing response. And so a strawberry plant that's sitting on the ground that gets nibbled on by little pests during the summertime, is the plant is basically reacting to the nibbling, creates a wound healing response. It makes a substance, a chemical called ellagic acid, and that ellagic acid fills up the fruit, that strawberry fruit. Okay, so you get a ton of this ellagic acid. Well, guess what? Ellagic acid is, when we eat it, it actually is anti-inflammatory. It cuts off the blood supply to cancer. So organic growing is actually more natural, and it stimulates the plant to create more of the bioactive that we seek, our body responds to, our body's self defenses respond to. Whereas if you treat with pesticides, it's, let's give it some, let's extend ourselves by be generous and say, we'll give some credit. We're trying to protect the plant. But maybe that is really kind of the wrong thing to do, because we want the plant to actually react normally, and then we pick that fruit or that vegetable that's now loaded with what it actually used to defend itself in Mother Nature. So that's part of that that ecosystem, that broader harmony that you're talking about.
I love that. What a great example, because it's like that little bit of input stress creates that reaction by the plant. Same with us, right? We get hit every day. We've got, 10 to the 30 viruses flying in the air right now. We're getting hit with everything all the time. We got it on our skin. We got it everywhere. So our bodies are constantly, but if we're over cleansed or over sterilized or whatever, like the super bug idea comes up, the proliferation of that, we become actually over cleaned and less biodiverse. Like, hell, having a dog is infinitely healthier for your microbiome because of that exposure and stuff. So what you're saying is, like, I think people can, and that's what I love about you in particular. You take incredibly complex things, the way you communicate, the how you've gone about it scientifically, and then the way you share it in the book, and that brings it down to what I love more than anything throughout all of even what's going on now, even what's going on with agriculture, even what's going on with climate change. I'm kind of divorcing some of the terms, because I think it's common sense, and that's what you're talking about. You're bringing it down, backed in science, backed in your experience, backed in your credible library of experience, and you're making it down to, like, that strawberry story. Oh, that makes sense, right? So that's the beautiful arc that I hear from you, and that I read in what you've read. And I just want to reflect that back, because there's an art to that, and there's a I think we can lose as a researcher. You know as well as I do, there's many researchers that you can't follow, you can't bridge, but you've done such an amazing job bridging that gap between things that are so infinitely complex in the biosphere of humanity and the earth, and then making it digestible for people.
Literally. So the thing that I think that is so exciting to me about food and health, and messaging about it, and talking about it, and explaining it, and we don't have all the answers. And so I always say, if you're talking to a scientist and they think like they act like they know everything, you sort of want to question how much of a scientist they are, because real scientists tell you how much we don't know. A lot of people, most people who are not in science regard scientists as people who get together and they talk about all this super smart stuff, and they share their knowledge, the brains, but in fact, real scientists get together, like me. We get together and we talk about all the things we don't know, not the things that we know. And I think a real scientist will tell you that, when you talk about our food systems and what's in our food and how our foods respond, and even how you cook foods to get what's good, we are just starting to learn what is going to change the world of understanding about food. But we're really still at the beginning. Our microbiome, how do you understand 39 trillion bacteria? Well, you got to start kind of one bug at a time, so to speak. And we're at the beginning of this long journey. The key, though, is that food and our health, it has immediacy. That's not something that you need to wait. It's not like a space program where you're going to try to figure out, when are we going to discover life on Mars, which could be any day. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that these are like, most science is far reaching, got to have patience. You never know when it's going to actually pay off. Food, man, has immediacy. Like something that we talk about now. If I told you that eating half a cup of cooked tomatoes 2 to 3 times a week will lower your risk of prostate cancer by 29%, as a man, you might go afterwards, hey, you know what? That sounds like something that's a choice I'm going to make for what I'm going to have for lunch or what I'm going to have for dinner. Immediacy counts because that it's actions that anybody can actually put into their own life.
Yeah, and you're doing it. It's just like you're doing it, like you said, 2-3 times a day. You're doing this stuff, but it's such a weird, also, I don't know, call it, the American culture, that we've divorced ourselves from. We've been manipulated, sugar, salt, fat, fast food, convenience, all of that stuff. We've divorced it. We've got food insecurity within cities, that people literally don't even have a grocery store in a 5 to 6 block radius, and they don't even know what that's about. They don't even know what an apple looks like. They know what applesauce is, but they don't know, and that's a weird world that we're sitting in too, right? So it's getting back to that, which is the most basic, but also, like, we have to look at this. What do you think about food insecurity? Like, what do you like? That's where, like, food choices, food insecurity, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, the whole idea of nutrition and supplementation came at the beginning, at the first part of the 20th century, so over 100 years ago, because within a highly developed nation, America, we were having people who were starving, who didn't have enough nutrition. And so, and then if you take a look at the rest of the world, it's magnified. There are places everywhere: India, Latin America, South America, Africa, but also in Europe, and also in Russia, and also in China, where the disparities that exist, the inequality that exists, really threatens the survival at such a fundamental levels, not being able to actually access good quality food. I think that, so we live in strange times where, as you pointed out, on one hand, there's abundance in many places. And in those same places, you end up having these ghastly differences where people can't even get enough food. Add on top of that another layer where the food choices that both sides have access to are not healthy choices, right? And so this is sort of the food industrial complex. And yeah, it's very tempting to actually start going down that road to say, who's the bad guy and who do we need to take down and legislate against, and who needs to go to jail. It's kind of like taking food as like the tobacco industry. I think there are plenty of people that are on that mission and are going to continue to do it. I sort of choose to look at a different side of the equation, which is, first, what do we have around us that Mother Nature already gave to us that's not expensive, that might be grown locally, that we can actually find and forage for ourselves, not in the woods, but really just looking in the community around us. I mean, sometimes convenience, like, nothing more convenient than going on Amazon or Instacart and clicking something and having it delivered to your house. But there's something to be said for looking for choosing food that we want to actually eat. And I think that that's something coming, that's coming in terms of our own nature, that we can go out to look and find and decide and choose what we want to actually eat. I also think that the more we're individually armed and aware of what are good choices to make, you don't need to make a lot of good choices every day. You need to at least make one good choice. Hopefully more than one, but at least one good choice. And I think this is where education is starting to really set into the community. People are paying attention now to food. I sort of thank the Food Channel for that, because people watching TV a decade ago were watching, master chefs whip off crazy ingredients, and they got interested in food and started to talk about it. So I think that there's a openness now to talking about food in a way that we didn't have before. But the idea of insecurity, if it's not delivered to your doorstep, go look for it. If you have to go look for it, know what to choose. And I think that, in today's world, partly aided by the fact that almost everybody has access to the internet, I think we can go search on Google, for a healthy ingredient, come up with celery seed, tomato, kale, chard, Swiss chard, bitter melon. You want to get a little bit more exotic, squid ink, things like that. I think you can search around and find some place that can actually get it for you. Economics are a whole other issue. That's a whole other tangled ball of yarn to kind of go through. But if we all actually became more aware and we all stood up for each other to really try to get better food. And by the way, although the pandemic makes it difficult, if you think about the traditional communities, and I know you spent a lot of time in traditional societies, people would gather together to share food. It wasn't individual entree-sized servings. You had plates, and the community got together, which itself lends to health, that idea of socialization as part of our health.
Yeah, which is, it's nice to see. Certainly California, we have a lot of them, and you now probably will have most of them shut down, but farmers markets where people can gather and get fresh food. The other thing that I want to just say, and since we're talking about it, like, one easy way for really a few cents, you can grow broccoli sprouts, sunflower sprouts, whatever, for, soak the seeds, get the seeds for a few, you literally 25 cents, and soak them, get them wet twice a day, and then within 5 to 7 days you have a whole salad. And of course, the benefits of broccoli sprouts are extraordinary: sulforaphane, anti-cancer stuff. So there is ways to do it, but I think what you're bringing up is also, like, it's an empowerment thing. People need to empower themselves to go, listen, I need to break the cycle of my habitual patterns of maybe nutrient-starved food that I'm choosing, and go back. Let's go look. Let's go take maybe little outside of my community and find a healthy grocery store, a farmer's market, or whatever, because it is, it is our responsibility for our health and our life as well.
Exactly. And by the way, the sulforaphanes in broccoli sprouts, there's some amazing facts about them. So I've done research on broccoli sprouts, whole broccoli, and most people who eat broccoli just eat the treetops, right? That's what your mom told you to eat. But if you go to a farmer's market, you know that a broccoli, an adult broccoli, grown-up broccoli, is not the spread. It's not just a treetop. There's this long stalk, and then a little bit of treetop on top, right? So if you go to the frozen section of a grocery store and you go to frozen broccoli and you cut open the bag, they just look like perfect florets. They're all the same size, and you got to ask your question, like, what happened to that gigantic stalk? So we did research on this. We wanted to study broccoli florets, the treetops, and to see if they had anti-cancer, cancer-starving effects based on the sulforaphanes. And we found indeed that broccoli treetops, the florets, have pretty powerful anti-angiogenic, cancer-starving effects. But then we got the stalks, and usually thrown away. And we actually studied that as well. And you'd be surprised, the stalks have twice the activity as the treetop. It's twice as
Wow.
potent. Okay. And by the way, the same thing we found with mushroom caps versus the mushroom stem. We also found the same thing with carrot tops. You know, the green carrot top compared to the taproot, the orange or purple or yellow carrot. If you study the top versus the bottom, the tops have twice as much of the good stuff and twice as much of the activity. Now, the reason that's important is a sustainability issue in part, because why throw the parts of the way of the food when we should be eating it? But now there's a reason to eat it, which is it has a lot. Now, back to the sprouts. So if you measure the amount of sulforaphane that's in an adult grown-up broccoli, right? I already told you that it's pretty potent, whether you talk the treetop or the stalk. The broccoli sprouts have 100 times the sulforaphane as the grown-up broccoli. So that means that when this broccoli seed sprouts, it's pretty much got all the sulforaphanes it's ever going to have. All right. And as it gets bigger, it just distributes it throughout. Not evenly, because the stems have twice as much as the florets. Makes sense, right? It's coming out of the ground, it's more on the bottom, a little less on the top. It all makes sense. This is what you're trying to say is that, like, you know, folks, this is not that difficult to understand if you really pay attention to what the science is telling us is revealing a lot of common sense things. But what you asked me, what surprised me, what surprised me that the sprouts are so much more potent, and not only for cancer starving effects, but studies have been done in young people just during flu season, getting the flu vaccine, right? That if they actually got the flu vaccine and drank a tall glass of broccoli sprout shake, so made a shake with broccoli sprouts, and you measured their immune system at the beginning versus a week or two later, those young people who had the broccoli sprout shake along with their flu shot had a 22 times increase in their immune response. 22 times. So basically they were much more protected against the flu. So that's not food versus medicine. That's food and medicine.
Wow. Was there ever any ones that just compared vaccinated without vaccinated? Was there?
No, not yet. That
Okay.
that would be sort of another experiment to actually do. That would be worthwhile doing. And some other, you know, like people getting immune treatment for cancer. It's been shown that if you are going to respond to the immune therapy, you got to look in the gut. You have one bacteria that's critical for responding to immune therapy, some forms of immune therapy to treat cancer. If you're missing that bacteria, you're probably not going to respond very well, which means that you might not make it. But if you have that one bacteria, it's called Akkermansia muciniphila, you're going to respond as a cancer patient to the treatment. And like my mom, who is 89, who's 87 now, actually had this bacteria. We gave her pomegranate juice because you can't have the probiotic yet. You gotta grow it. How? Naturally, by eating whole plant-based foods. In this case, pomegranate juice has elagitannins. These are natural substances that cause your gut to secrete mucus, and the mucus basically acts as fertilizer for this bacteria. Healthy bacteria talks to your immune system and basically says, cancer cells, let's go get them. So it's really quite amazing thinking about the remarkable benefits that foods have to activate our health defenses.
How exciting of a time too, right? Where science is really starting to see into the body more and more. I mean, this has got to be so, you've always been passionate about what you do and it comes out of you. And this has got to be exciting as a doctor, as a researcher, and someone who's passionate about food, all of those things coming together, and for you to be able to share that is
Well, this is why I love working with chefs and people who are, you know, trained in the food world and farmers. You know, I think that what we need to do, the future of food as medicine, are people coming together that wouldn't normally be in the same room normally, right? You got your doctor, you got your researcher, your biologist, you've got your farmer, you've got your chef. Previously, in past decades, it was really just the person who's a nutritionist or dietitian. They were all by themselves trying to do all this hard work. Now, when you add them and you bring everybody together, like this multi-talented group of people together to contribute, all of a sudden we're able to actually better appreciate what we actually what do we put into our bodies.
Yeah, and that's again, that's representations of a bit of a bigger lens, right? So they're seeing stuff that you're not seeing, and you're seeing stuff that they're not seeing, and that's where that kind of, and also that indigenous knowledge. I mean, there hasn't been a time that I showed up in some foreign country, foreign land, where I was looking at one thing and came away with 10 other things, or 10 other ways, or different ways of looking at it, or growing it, or processing it, or understanding it, that I wasn't looking for. And that's where I think the value of what you're saying, the value for me was always showing up. That was the infinitely more valuable than sitting back and researching something or reading something. Not that that's not important, but it's really when shown up, you get the researcher that hasn't published anything but has studied it or has grown it for, generations, and you're like, it's wisdom that is just so powerful when brought together.
So I'll tell you a quick little story. But before I went to medical school, I did a gap year, and in my gap year, I actually went to the Mediterranean and I lived in Italy and Greece. Among many things that I did, this is long before people even heard of the Mediterranean diet, long before the blue zones were discovered. I was walking the walk, like really living there, looking at markets, watching people cook, being in people's kitchens. And one of the, to your point about, showing up and seeing it and living it, I embedded myself in a monastic community that you had to rock climb to get to. And this group lives a medieval lifestyle, 16th century lifestyle. It's called Mount Athos. It's in the northeast corner of Greece, and no running water, no electricity. They grow all their food and they cook everything like over fire. And it was quite amazing to take part in the Easter feast when I was there. The monk that was supposed to be the chef responsible for the cooking got sick. And so I got tapped to help throw my weight in for the community to help cook. And so here we were in this like ancient monastic kitchen in this ginormous cauldron of stewed beans, right? Legumes with spices and herbs and healthy oils. And we were stirring this thing. I remember stirring it with a canoe paddle, something, or a spoon the size of a canoe paddle, because we were feeding the whole monastery. And again, knowing where the food came from, being in the fields, being part of that community, I walked away learning something about that indigenous practice that I couldn't have had just reading about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, yeah, you get everything from that perspective. You're getting the microbes from the area. You're getting the lowered stress. You're getting the cultural connectivity. Like it's just so makes me want to get up and travel right now. But that's such a part of it too, right? Lowering stress and celebrating, and celebrating food and celebrating the wholeness of it, and really celebrating that whole unbelievable collaboration we have with the plants, right? We talk about eating a strawberry and it lowers inflammation. You're like, how is that possible, right? Like this beautiful, like here we show up, there's plants all around us. Yeah, some can kill us, we've learned, but many of which can help us thrive and live our life. It's just a extraordinary, unbelievable experiment that we are participating in.
And it actually gives us the reason to work harder and to be more mindful in protecting our planet, because it's part of the bounty of what we actually get when we actually care for the rock upon which we live.
Yeah, well, the great Paul Hawken wrote Drawdown, and now this great book, Regeneration. Regeneration really is following nature. right? In any lens, not just food, not just, but industry. Like, let's follow nature, not just extract it. So what are we doing? How are we doing this? That's where it's like these are common sense principles that we can apply throughout all ways. And dude, this has been such a pleasure to reconnect with you, and just to see and to feel your passion again. And really, Eat to Beat Disease is incredible. And I want people to check it out. And where can people find you, and what are you working on right now?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a number of different projects to really move food as medicine forward. We're really trying to figure out how to actually take these principles and move into metabolism and move into having a brand new view towards body fat. So, if you're somebody who, even if you're somebody who's skinny or slim, even if you're somebody who's perfectly fit, there's a reason for you to actually pay attention to what body fat can do for you or to you, and how food can actually be used to amp up your health defenses and also streamline your metabolism. So that's something I'm working on right now. I'm actually working on my next book. It's going to be all about that. It's pretty exciting. I'm very excited about it because, hey, you can actually eat food to lose weight is kind of a cool another light bulb to go off. And anybody who wants to follow me, I'm continuously putting out information based on what I'm doing. You can come to my website. It's www.drdrwilliamleeli.com. drdrwilliamleeli.com. You can follow me on social my handle's at Dr. Dr. William Lee LI, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Come check me out. By the way, I periodically offer these free masterclasses, and I welcome people to come on board. It's pretty cool. Darin, I actually have thousands of people that sign on when I do these free masterclasses. One had people from 30 countries all come on at the same time. And, it's an opportunity for me to share the research I'm doing, what I'm learning about the body's health defense systems, and just spreading the word. I think that the key I look at for what you're doing and what you're taping and what we're talking about, it's an opportunity to have a ripple effect on the community around us. So if you like what you're hearing, there's a lot more to learn. Come to my website, drdrwilliamleeli.com, and would love to actually continue to stay in touch with your community.
That'd be great, man. And yeah, maybe we can, when your next master class is, maybe we can do an Instagram live, get a bunch of people on and pump it up. And I'd love to jump on as well. And it's been such a pleasure, dude. And let's stay connected. I love what you're doing. I'm working on a second book now. It's all about kind of the toxification side of things. My father suffered. He was worked on atomic bombs during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So his immune system was compromised, but he was one of the first people in the early 90s who was trying to raise the alarm about chemical sensitivity disorder, the PFOAs, PFOSs, endocrine disrupting compounds. And so I'm head first into that because I'm finding a lot of metabolic issues as a result of this colliding of our modern day chemical exposure. So it's really eye-opening. So
That's exciting.
man, yeah, it is exciting because it's another side of it that we also like. Here's an effect that we've been having on the modern day human that we need to actually deal with because it's been affecting us. Teflon is in the umbilical cord of every newborn on the planet, right? The Teflon compound. It's along with 208 other chemicals. So it's like this experiment is not working out so well. So it goes along with what we were saying. Like, we have to support this whole ecosystem in the way we're moving forward. So I can't wait for your second book. Can't wait to talk to you again. Let me know about the masterclass. We'll do an Instagram live. Plus, I'll let you know when this is going to come out, and we'll get to it, dude. So great to see you.
Thank you. Great to be on.